I don't think that cinema and films should be blaming anything, should be condemning the political or social situation or exposing it in any way. I think that it's important to find stories which are relevant for a specific period, for a specific age. And in a way it is the case with these two films of mine. But the topic of the films isn't precisely the social situation of the country in a given moment. What I'm trying to do is to find particular situations in which some people find themselves that would also speak about the general context of that moment in that country. But as you are saying, indeed, the films maybe speak about a crisis which is a bit more general. It's a crisis which is visible outside, but which comes from inside in a way. What are the reasons for this crisis? It's difficult to say, and it's not for a film to analyze. As you know, you have a very limited amount of time in a film to do a lot of things. And the most important thing for me is to be truthful to the characters and to the situations. In 4 months, for example, it's true that it's a private situation in which somebody has to test his own values about life and make some choices which are important. And it's true that the context plays a major role, but the film finally, it's not directly about the communist society. If you want, it's about the side effects of a system which was very manipulative, a system that was really following people very closely. But I think it's difficult to say that only or mostly the politicians or the church are to be blamed for the present situations. I think that education, in a more general sense, plays a role. But there are several factors contributing to education. Each of us, we all have a responsibility because we are the parents of some children that we educate. We are the result of the education that our parents gave to us. And it's a context in which, I don't know, the reactions of the society to what happens, the personal education and the school lead to the way people are today. What I wanted to speak a little bit about in Beyond the Hills is that, especially in places that claim to be, and communities that claim to be very Christian, this kind of solidarity that we are expected from a Christian education is not very visible. It's very difficult to define religion, and I think it's very difficult to say that it's either prism or freedom. It depends on the person. It depends on your standpoint. I think that for characters with very little hopes in life, like these characters that I was talking about, it could represent the best of their choices at the age of 19. Because there's something important about religion and about that community. It brings affection. If these girls miss something, they miss a family, they miss affection. We speak about children that were left behind in these institutions that didn't have parents. So you have to understand that it's more difficult, and there's a comfort coming with belonging to somebody, to some religion, to an idea that make some order into your life. But at the same time, it's difficult to make personal choices once you enter this way and you take this way. But this is just a personal choice. So I think it's very difficult to say. The film was trying more to speak about how relative good and evil can be.
Yes. All persons are good, have good intentions.
But this
They all have good intentions.
They all have good intentions.
Young priests, girls, families.
If you see the film from a religious standpoint, you will see that this is something that they fear about. That you can have a lot of good intentions, but you never know who is behind your good intentions. This is one of the problems that religious people have. You never know if your intentions come from the good side or from the bad side, and this is something they have to figure out. This is the education that they get about good, bad, about evil, and about God. But what I was, the discussion there is a little bit more complex. It's also about the society, and it balances this lack of attitude and of empathy of the everyday society and their attitude. They might be wrong with what they do by the end, but at least they try to help from the beginning and to be there for this girl. It is easier for me to say why communism failed to pass moral values. First of all, because it didn't really have a lot of moral values to pass. It had a lot of artificial values, if you want it, which are very theoretical and they sound wonderful, but on the field they didn't work. It's one thing to try and apply or to be part of these beautiful theoretical ideals of equality, and it's a very different thing to try and place them in everyday life. And this is one of the things that we know quite well, and that lived communism didn't have to do at all with theoretical ideas of communism. And it's mostly about propaganda. It's mostly about an ideology that would serve a small group of people. That idea about the people ruling and sharing everything, worked on paper but didn't work on the field. And little by little, there was a parallel reality that took over the reality. As you know, probably in the last 10 or 15 years of communism, mostly in Romania, but in most of the communist countries, what you could read in the press or you can see on television was Orwell 1984. It was an invented reality. It didn't have anything to do with the reality in the country. So by the end of this, it was clear for everybody living that the truth is somewhere else. It's not in what they say, and therefore you can't really talk about moral values. While for the religion there's something else. After 50 years in which religion was tolerated but not encouraged, people needed some values to replace the fake values of communism, which never worked.
Where did they find these values?
Well, for very many people, they were looking for these values in religion. It's not so much about the ancient values of Christianity. It's mostly about the rituals. The rituals bring you a lot of comfort. So another thing that I really wanted to speak about in this second film that we're talking about is that rituals took the place of the Christian values. Christian values are part of a very good education. They can give you some basic values about solidarity with the others and a lot of things. While, rituals are just habits. They don't add a lot of values. It's a good thing that you know the others. If you go to the church, you won't harm them and stuff like this. But if you stay only on this level, you stay on the surface. And you can be very easily the target of a lot of superstitions, because this mix a lot. Rituals and superstitions mix a lot. And superstitions doesn't have much to do with religion and with belief.
And a lot of crimes happened in the name of the God, I think there is.
A lot of crimes happen anyway. Some of them are made in the name of God, it's true, but some of them are
Stalin, in the name of God,
made in the name of whatever ideals.
Whatever, yes.
If you want, at the end, the film also brings this as a possible topic of conversation, that in the name of the greatest ideals of this world, a lot of crimes have been made. Individual crimes or mass crimes.
So in a way we have to reinvent moral values. And in which way we can do this? Believe in ourselves, in the society, in what?
Well, it's difficult to say what we have to do today reinvent our values, but I think that it's always...
Or other values. The values
I'm not sure that it's very easy to reinvent that. What are, if you want, you know, what are the values of the present days? There are, some of them are very superficial. I think that it's important to make sure that as part of the education that children are having, they get back to some basic values, because, you know, the basic values never changed.
Yes.
The only thing is that the attention that we give to them changed today, and we got lost in a lot of details. We got lost as adults in a lot of details, and the education of the children got lost in a lot of information. And it's not about information, it's about what you do with this information.
Culture has nothing to do with information. I think it's
ideally
more deep.
Ideally, culture should help you to use this information based on some moral values and principles that you need to have from home and from some other institutions. If you are a religious person and you get these values from the church, very well. If not, and you don't believe in church and you get them from school, even better. If you get them from your parents, it's the same thing. Through cinema, we have a very small influence. For example, what we are doing now...
Small influence, yes.
Well, yes, we have to admit that we have a small influence. Just imagine what is the impact of what we are doing, because the kind of cinema that we are doing includes a little bit of this education, if you want. It's not a direct education, it's not a preach, because then it's didactic, and cinema should stay an art and not become this kind of education, but it encourages people to do something, and this is something that we can do with cinema. It encourages them to look for these values and to think with their own minds and make their own decisions. For me, the screenplay is probably the most important part of the preparation of the film. In all the films that I made so far, I discovered that you can ruin the film when shooting, but you can't fix it unless the screenplay was good. So I really passed a lot of time trying to think about this plan, which is the screenplay. For me, it's more than a plan. Writing the screenplay is not so complicated, but understanding what you are talking about, this is complicated. And I think that what an initiative like this one can do good for the participants, it can help them clarify their ideas. The screenplay is not a story with situations. The screenplay, you know, cinema has this problem. It needs to speak about something. It's not important to just shoot a piece of reality and quote a piece of reality and hope this is cinema. It's not like this. Even cinema, which is very close to realism, it needs to make sense. This is your position of a spectator when you sit on a chair. You see some situations and you're looking for the sense of these situations. So, as a writer, you need to understand what your situations speak about. This is something that you need to clarify when you write a screenplay. Once you clarify this, everything will fall into place into the screenplay. Unless you clarify this, you won't be able to handle this kind of freedom that you're having as a writer. You are clueless. You don't know in which direction your screenplay is going. So I've never been to a process like this, but my feeling is that it always helps to talk to somebody. If you talk to somebody, you will tell him the story. You are forced to reduce it to what works into words. When you put it into words, you have the synthesis of what you want to say. So it helps a lot being verbal about what you want to do. My feeling is that meeting the right person in an environment like this might help you clarify your ideas and getting closer to what you want to say. Finally, it's your film. It's not possible to make your film with the imagination of somebody else, but somebody else can help you clarify your own ideas. You know, screenplays are a very complex enterprise, and this is why it's difficult to write a good screenplay, because the screenplay is not just a story. It's not just a story.
No,
ideally, a screenplay should present a filmmaker's position about life and about his art.
Exactly.
If you get there. So first of all, you need to have an opinion about this, which can be visible in the screenplay. You need to think about cinema, you need to think about what is specific for cinema. You need to understand the possibilities and the tools of your art, and then you need to make sure that you have something to say. For this, it's not enough to be a good craftsman.
No.
You need to be a complex person.
Yes,
you need to have some culture, to observe life, to have the pleasure of telling stories about things that you've observed, to have something to say. There's something about writing. You can learn writing up to a certain point. After that point there's something that belongs to you. You know, there is no school for writers. You can't become a writer. You can, train yourself to be a writer if you are a storyteller. If you train yourself as a storyteller, as a young person that, loves observing things and telling things, and later on you can develop and become a better storyteller. But, things can be learned up to a certain point, unless you have a natural drive for observing things, for telling stories, it's going to be difficult. But of course there are things you can learn, and little by little you can become better in being more focused about what you want to say, but keeping in mind all the time that cinema needs some freedom. If you are completely control freak up to the end, you won't let in the film the things that might happen when you write or when you shoot, because cinema is, in a way, it's an experience. You don't know where you will be at the end when you start. It's an experience. I don't believe too much in national cinema. What is national cinema at the end? The only thing that connects national cinema is the language. But apart from this, you can have, a Polish director that can be closer to a Turkish director, and to a Mexican director, then you can have two Greek directors. So I think this is easier for the press, for the audience to handle things, to market things. But I don't think that a Greek cinema, a Greek wave or Romanian wave speak about an artistic manifest. Cinema is a very individual art with points of view which belong to every filmmaker, and I think that creativity stops when you try to follow a pattern. What's important for us to try and do with cinema is to wake people up and make them think about their own lives and their own choices. Personal freedom belongs to you.
Do people want to wake up?
I don't think people want to wake up. They want to sleep, watch stupid television and stay on the internet and enjoy and be entertained. This is what I don't like about what cinema became to be today. I don't have anything against entertainment, but it became just entertainment. I think that's 95% or maybe more of the cinema that people consume today is entertainment. So that they got used to the idea that cinema is entertainment, which is not okay. We need to have a variety of choices, and we still need to use cinema a little bit closer to one of the purposes that it had at the beginning. To have it as a way of expressing yourself and making some other people understand themselves better and think about what you have to tell them. Think about themselves, think about the world surrounding them.